Hey trackers, Bear Tracker Nature Films here today, looking at something different. This is not really a track so much as it is a sign. It's something that's left behind by an animal and that you can find in the forests. I found this one in northwestern California beneath a tree called a canyon live oak. Now this thing looks like a potato, right? Kind of round and about the right size for a small potato. It's got a brown shell on it, and it's got all these little holes in it. So what is this object? Well, this object is called a gall, and here is a size comparison. That's in centimeters, that's in inches, so it's not really huge. And what is a gall? Well, so a gall is something that is made by either an insect like a wasp, or there are other things that make galls like fungus. Different species make these. Wasps are probably the most common. There's sawflies that make these. This one, I believe, is made by a wasp called Andricus is its species name. And I don't know for sure. It might be Andricus quercuscalifornicus, but I'd have to look that up. Anyway, what happens is this structure grows after eggs are laid by a wasp. So this structure grows in response to a wasp coming along and depositing her eggs. So wasps have ovipositors, and they use those to make a hole and place the eggs into a branch, or in some cases they're on leaves or buds of different species of trees and plants. The particular gall you find usually is associated with a particular type of host plant, and in this case this type of gall is associated with the canyon live oak. There are several other galls that are found on canyon live oak and just on that species. But this one is pretty common, and it starts out in early spring with the wasp coming along, and she will deposit her eggs into the plant tissues. And what happens is, as those eggs hatch and begin to grow, the little larvae in there that is inside the plant tissue now starts to feed on some of that plant tissue. And as the larvae does that, it stimulates the plant tissue to grow and to try and scar over that injury. And so the plant tissue grows around the larvae. And in the case of galls, that plant tissue grows into a particular shape. And this one just happens to look like a potato when it's all finished. But it starts out just as a little swelling on the branch. You can see the remaining branch of the tree here. Starts out just as a little small swelling, and it grows larger through the season. Some of these galls have a single larva in them. Some of them have multiple larvae in them. This one I think has multiple, because you can see all the exit holes here. At least I'm pretty sure that's what those are. Sometimes the holes are predators coming in and trying to eat the larvae. So as the larvae grows larger, the gall grows around it, and it continuously produces more plant tissue on the inside. And that's the tissue that the growing larvae is feeding on. So it grows, and the gall grows, and eventually the outer shell gets harder. Like this is more the texture of bark. It's hard at this point. When it first started, it was more soft and spongy, but as it grows, it takes on a different texture. So this is an old one. This has obviously fallen off the tree, probably last fall, and it seems because of these holes that the little larvae are gone, but I don't know that for sure. So usually what happens, and this may not be specific to this species, is usually what happens, the larvae grow in there until it's time for them to pupate. And then once that happens, the larvae will come up near the surface of the gall and drill a hole that goes almost through to the outside, but not quite. It leaves a little fine layer of tissue there, so that once it's hatched out into the, become a pupa, and then it becomes an adult, once it hatches out, it'll have an easier time drilling its way out. So a lot of times they'll make a hole, they'll pre-make the hole, and then they'll pupate inside in their little cocoon. And once it's ready to become an adult, which usually happens the next spring, they will have a pre-drilled hole that they'll come out of, and it's a lot easier for it to get out of that pre-drilled hole than it is to come out through this hard tissue, because by the end of the season this is hard tissue. So I'm not sure if that's what's going on here with these ones that seem to be plugged still. You can see a few of these here that still have some sort of plug in them, and I'm assuming that that may be just where the larvae last season drilled the holes but then didn't survive for some reason and never emerged. So once they emerge, they'll be able to pop right through that small bit of tissue and come out as the adult wasp. So the adult wasp doesn't live very long usually. Their only function is usually just to lay eggs. So they'll find a mate if it's a species that needs to find a mate. Some of them are able to reproduce parthenogenetically, which means that they have a female generation only and don't need the males to reproduce. But some of them do require the males of the species, and so they will make their eggs, and then they will find another branch on the tree and deposit the eggs and start that process all over again. So those adults are around in the spring usually with a lot of these species, and so they are depositing their eggs, and then by the end of the summer or the fall, you will end up with galls, swellings like this on the tree. And a lot of times they overwinter. Sometimes they fall to the ground in the fall if they're attached to the leaves, and those will overwinter in the soil or just on the ground with the leaves. So different species have different survival strategies, and different particular galls have different survival strategies. So what I'm talking about is more general rather than related to this particular species. So anyway, the inside of this is usually just a bunch of spongy plant tissue that the larva has been feeding on. So I can kind of cut into this because it looks like they have already emerged and are done, and this is an old gall. So I may just cut a slice into this so that you can see what the inside looks like also, and see what it looks like inside there. There's probably multiple chambers where each one of the larvae grew and then pupated. There may be even the pupal skins or the cocoons left behind in there, depending upon the species, and I'm not sure about this one. But this is a gall, and they are found on plants. They're found on trees and on different places on the trees, depending upon the species of wasp or sawfly that created the gall. And the gall is a response by the plant to the stimulus of being fed upon by the larva of that wasp inside of its tissues. And each one of these has a different form. There's some that look like stars, there's some that look like turbans, some of them look like little pointy spines. It just depends upon the species what the appearance is. So let's open this up and see what's inside. So I tried to open it so that you could see where this one was. This is one of the ones that was blocked. And so you can see there's a little chamber below that little white material, might be webbing, I'm not sure what that is, that seals this off. Oops, it fell out. So anyway, that was blocked. And I don't see a larva or a pupa in there, so I'm not sure what that material was. This little tiny bit here. Camera will focus. Come on. So there's the little piece that was in there that was blocking the hole, and I'm not sure if that's webbing or what that is. It's a very fine, tiny little bit of tissue perhaps. So I'm not sure if that one did not hatch or what happened. So I've sliced into the end of it so you can see kind of what looks like all the little chambers inside of there. Whoops. Cat walking by. So you can see all the little chambers. This one over here had the white material sealing off the hole, but there is nothing in the hole that I see, so it looks like the larvae are gone. They've pupated and hatched out, become adults, and probably are out there right now or or were, this may be a gall that's older than a year, out there laying eggs to create the second generation, or the next generation of wasps. So there, a little closer up, is one of the holes that had the whitish material covering the entrance, and I'm not sure what that is. I'm using the macro lens to try and get closer to it. It might be the pupal skin, or it might be, the remains of the cocoon that was in there. Not really sure what that is. So that's a mystery. I'll have to maybe look up a little bit more about the biology of the species and see if I can figure out exactly what that is. If I do figure out what it is, I'll put it in text in the video so you can read all about it. One thing that's interesting here is how hard this material is. It's very lignified, or like bark at this point. It's hard. However, when these are growing, this is spongy and soft, and the larvae are able to feed on this material. But this is an old gall. It's probably a year old at least, and it was found on the ground, so it's obviously finished its life cycle. And, at this point, it's just dried out, hard material. So there are no larvae left in it. This is a used gall. It's served its purpose, and now it's just giving nutrients back to the forest by rotting on the forest floor. But it was interesting to see that there are so many chambers in this, and each one of those chambers held one of the larvae, which became a pupae, and then exited as an adult and went on to produce more eggs and produce more galls of this species. I'm getting deeper into the gall, and the tissue is very spongy inside. You can see something in this chamber right here. By my thumb, it looks like maybe a larvae that didn't hatch or didn't survive. Might still be in that one. But it's a little softer right here where it's wet. I think it's just been sitting out in the rain for a long time. So as I go further into the gall, I'm finding more of the chambers have that whitish material in them. I don't have a microscope or anything to look at it. So at this point, I'm assuming that is the shed skin that was left behind when the larva metamorphosed into a pupa, or it could be the remains of the cocoon that, once the pupa became an adult, could be the remains of the cocoon that it left behind. So I'm not sure positively what that is, but that's what I'm assuming that whitish material is. Without a microscope, I don't really have a way to magnify it much better than this. So there you have it. There's the inside of a gall, and I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about galls, what they are, what function they serve, and how they are made. And remember, this is just one of many species. There are thousands of these different species out there, many of them that haven't even been identified yet, because some of them are so small. And every one of these things has a really complex life cycle, and it's a field that's kind of wide open for study. And I hope you've enjoyed learning a little bit about galls. And I do want to make a note that this was a dead gall. Essentially, there was nothing living in it. If this was a live green gall, I would not have cut it off a plant and cut it open. The only reason I cut this one open is because it was obviously done, and the animals that were in it had already departed, and the gall was just whatever remained behind. I would not, for a video, I would not sacrifice a living creature to do the video. That would be kind of unethical, wouldn't it? Anyway, so this is a gall of an Andricus species of wasp, and it's, I think they call this polythalamus because it has more than one larva in it. Monothalamus would be if it just had a single one, but each one of these little holes had one egg in there that became a larvae, and then pupated in there and left behind this little shed skin as it exited and became an adult wasp. And the adult wasp went along and deposited its eggs in another branch and created the next generation of gall wasps. Hope you've enjoyed learning about these creatures and that you find some on your own in your own explorations outdoors.